so let's get back. Can I have your attention for a few minutes? I know you're really working hard because you've left it until last minute. Not working during the breaks and the lunch, but instead you're working now. But that's all right. So I think you've already started on this, and I'll give you a little bit more time on the questions that I've given you. But before that, I just wanted to give an example of a technology that is, let's say, an up-and-coming technology that is available, and that we have several people who have done a little bit of research on here. So I want you to give an example of how we could think about one of these technologies. Let's see if I can get this in full screen.
Okay.
Let's open up.
Alexa, give me an applause. Okay. Amazon Echo, music, information, and more. Just us.
Right, so increasingly we are having voice interfaces built into, well, all of our phones, presumably if you use a smartphone, and standalone devices, Google Home, Alexa, and so on. And you can do all sorts of things with them. This guy used to play some music, and his wife used it to express her gratitude in magnificent applause. But, and these technologies is kind of a new interface that has come into our living rooms, into our phones, into all of our different spaces. And they allow us to do all sorts of things. The primary modality, we said modality yesterday, modality is the ways you can interact with the technology, right? The primary modality of this is through a speech interface, where we can hear a spoken voice, and a microphone that can record and then run a model and interpret what we are asking it to do, right? So it sends all our audio data off to some cloud server, which analyzes what we've said and then tries to figure out what kind of things that we want it to do. And as Ankit was pointing out previously, a lot of these kind of technologies have actually emerged from assistive technologies. So we had a lot of these speech-to-text assistive technologies, and from there we've now gotten mainstream technologies that are that show up in our living rooms and our smartphones and so on. So that all sounds good. And presumably, if I were you, my expectation would be that the wide mainstream emergence of these technologies should make life easier for a lot of people, and presumably should support some form of digital inclusion. Can we give some examples of how this could support digital inclusion? How this kind of technology could serve to support inclusion or participation with technology?
That is navigation much easier.
Okay. You can elaborate a little? It makes navigation easier for
him. So sets alarm on his phone just by saying, okay Google, alarm at 6 a.m.
And that makes it easier for him because
when it was a smartphone is a new thing for him, navigating it to an alarm clock was difficult.
Okay. Yeah. So it can help people. Maybe, I don't know about your dad, but my dad, he sometimes struggles with technology. He's not brought up with technology. So it could help your sort of barriers in terms of your experience of technology.
So yeah. Before this device comes, I was using this Google Maps. So Maps was mostly graphical interface. So I can see which map is like when I see how much distance is from Bangalore to Chennai. So it will be like fully a map interface. So now I can ask Alexa, Google Assistant, what is the distance between Bangalore and Chennai? And I can also ask what are the places that I have to cross, where is the toll gate, where is this thing and that thing. So I can get a clear picture in my mind from Chennai to Bangalore.
Yeah. Yeah. We have some more examples.
With the interaction with disease, what I also found is it's become easier to, the usage of the tool has become easier. Probably the phone, while he's uses Google Assistant a lot of times, it's much easier than probably anything else. And that's what I.
For different kind of apps, or.
Yeah, for navigating through the phone or the usage of the tool itself.
So it's provided a new modality to the phone, right? It's a phone which previously had a modality of a touch screen, a multi-touch interface would be the initial modality, and mostly using text. Suddenly we have a new modality inside it. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, so literacy barrier. Most of the people know English, can speak English, but many of them cannot. At least if not English, local languages. Many of the people are bad at writing. And most of us definitely are better speakers than writers. So that way, make everyone's life easier.
So it can serve to reduce the literacy barrier both in English but in any languages. It supports lots of different languages, some of them at least. And that sounds good. Like we have a technology that allows us to overcross certain barriers and provides opportunities, a lot of opportunities clearly. But I'd like to have a few critical voices, and we've had a bit of work on this, me and Vidisha, together with one of our students, on specifically these kind of voice technologies. Maybe can you give some examples from that of how perhaps this has a lot of opportunities for inclusion, but maybe there is some other.
Yeah, so a couple of things we found from the gender point of view that the safety and privacy is an issue for women. So one of the two main purposes for which both men and women use voice was purpose of travel or booking something. So they found that especially women who are working and also use public transport, they did not feel comfortable using voice apps when they're in spaces where they could be heard by other people who are not their family members. This is when they're in the public spaces. This is a concern of private security mostly and safety. But within the home spaces, what we found, we actually did a study among engineering students who are girls. So they come from sort of a privileged background. And for them, the notion of space was also very important. Not so much in terms of security and safety, that is, I think, a concern across all classes, but also what the content that they're searching for using voice. So, and one of the advantages that we had, the student who was doing this research, she was a girl. So a lot of things that they could open up to, that the kind of content they search, which are usually prohibited, or there is a kind of social, stigma attached to the girls should not search this kind of content.
But how is it different from searching the same thing?
So what we found for them, their understanding, this did not come through in the interviews that we had with the male representative, that they're extremely alert of the space and context in which they're searching and what they're searching. So there is a direct correlation between the content of the search and the context of the search. So that they're across all circumstances. So why I gave these two examples, that irrespective of whether it's a private space or it's a public space, this notion of space is extremely important for them to make a decision what is the content that they're going to search for. And this was not so much, I'm not saying that it's a binary that men did not think about the context. Of course, there are
Can you give me a
specific examples.
possible example?
Yeah. So, for example, as I said, that they would not, if they are in a public space, let's say if you are in a bus stop and you want to book an Ola, or in a public space you want to book an Ola, they don't want to use voice because they don't want people around them to know what is their next destination. If they want to search content which is very private, right?
All incognito searches need to be text.
Yes, exactly. Which could be same for male, right? I'm not saying that male don't have prohibited content to search for, but irrespective of where they're public or the private, their understanding of their alertness to space content relationship, we found way higher than their male counterparts. So this one thing that we found about gender. The another thing that we found about that, I think this is also very well researched already in NCI. There are a lot of people working on this. This whole notion that we have about making this, Google also started, I think last year they made about 14 Indian languages available on for voice search. And this was one of the steps that they took towards being more inclusive to people who are not comfortable in English or people who had a low level of literacy. What we found actually on the content, people who had, we are not talking about illiterate people, we are talking about people who have their level of literacy is very low. They are not very comfortable in reading and writing. Can I show you how to spell this?
Google support imposing the language.
It's not imposing, it's about also what you understand that just giving access to vernacular language is not inclusive enough. It also depends on context. The same context might not apply, let's say maybe, I don't know, somewhere in Latin America. But this English being a status symbol, English being an aspirational language, is very specific to maybe a post-colonial or British colony. Or it could be French in some French colonies. So there is an aspirational category to language, which then sort of break the assumptions that we already made before, thinking that okay,
But where is
this
the
is
exclusion?
So,
you want to talk about?
no, I was just saying one of the assumptions that these have been designed with, and a lot of the emphasis that has been placed on it, has been on creating the ability to speak to it in vernacular language, that being part of a digital inclusion effort. And if we say that English is an aspirational language and actually people prefer to speak in English, then maybe that effort would be better spent in understanding mixed languages.
Yes.
So that people could speak in English and then insert a few Hindi words where they didn't know the English word. So maybe rather than teaching the device to speak Hindi, we could teach the device to understand mixed mode languages, because people
just accents, right? I mean, there's so many videos where some accents the assistants cannot understand.
That
Or
we
English
did not
text.
sort of explore, but this mixed language we
Google
think
has
about.
an Indian English. It's some sort of a racist.
It's a Microsoft.
So what we figured out, especially among urban youth and irrespective of their class, none of us use a pure language. So all of us, most of the Indians are bilingual, right? So all of us always speak in two languages simultaneously.
If you want to learn a new language, you must know 3 languages.
Yes, exactly.
So ultimately, you will be learning that language.
And
it takes some time.
Yeah, so there is no pure language, especially in urban areas. Maybe rural areas, the realities will be different. I don't want to comment on that. But that's what we have found. Nobody speaks in a pure language. So that's something would be a context-specific learning for design. That this is a particular reality of India, especially urban India.
Yeah, even if
And
you
one-
speak one language,
sorry.
even if you speak one language, I think there are some words you can't find a replacement.
Yeah, you can't.
And one of the things to think about how these technologies operate as exclusions, one is barriers. You hit a barrier, you can't use it, it just stops you. There's one thing, right? There can be technologies that actively resist your use, right? That are actively designed for toys designed for boys. This is only for boys, and they build on the social norms and resist your use by other people. But a lot of exclusion could also work in purely a blind spot. It could be in this way, a blind spot to the fact that mixed languages is more important, or the aspirational nature of English as opposed to. So you design for the idea that we have these users who only speak Hindi and should use this device only in Hindi or only in Bangla. But in doing that, we may miss the fact that, in fact, English or mixed language would be a much more inclusionary choice as a design. So exclusion can work like that. It can work in the sense of what do you focus on, or what do you emphasize, and what do you not. I thought I'd give the word to Arkitos because I think you've done a little bit of work on these things as well. So maybe we'll share. I just thought maybe I should share my.
So for us at French School Inclusion, we are actually building a skill or an application on Google Assistant and Alexa. And through the process, we have been also trying to understand what are the upsides and downsides for people with disabilities. I think these personal assistant powered devices, whether it's a speaker or a personal assistant application like a Siri or a Google Assistant on the mobile phone, they're very useful for people with disabilities. And I think it does help in reducing many small little barriers that one encounters on a daily basis to help them a little more independent. So, for instance, a person who has a locomotor disability, I think a home automation which is linked to your personal assistant device could be very, very beneficial in terms of just navigating or ensuring that the lights are turned on or off. For us, it might be a simple thing or something for which we may not give a lot of thought. But for a person who has a certain disability, it might be a project in itself to kind of turn on and turn off the lights or just put on the curtains or not. Just by having a home automation, I think it can significantly help them in terms of reaching there. I also personally see in terms of the quick information as a blind person or doing some quick action for which say my when I'm using a screen reader on my phone, it is far more linear. It takes me a little more extra time. I am able to achieve those tasks much more efficiently, much more quickly. What I'm also seeing many of these devices or application, I'm not even call it application, they become a platform and they become multimodal. So earlier, one of the biggest criticism for these voice-enabled application was that they are not inclusive of people who are hard of hearing or people who are deaf. Now, last year, Apple enabled voice text typing on Siri, and now also if you see even in Google, they are supporting multimodal interaction where you can actually carry forward your conversation from a speaker to your mobile phone application. So they become far more inclusive, and I think they able to execute small tasks such as making a payment now. I often use Siri to make a Paytm transfer far more easily and far more swiftly, which the native application of Paytm is not very accessible. So it has actually made things much more inclusive for me. It has opened up doorways where which earlier was not inclusive enough. Now that they're on a platform, they work natively there, so it's becoming that much more inclusive. So I think there is a lot more upside. I think I especially see a lot more focus of potential benefit in cases of learning disabilities, perhaps, and pardon my ignorance, but yeah, I think there's a lot more can be achieved in terms of education for people with learning disabilities or visual impairment. I think there's not much done yet, but then it can offer a lot of potential. I definitely see a challenge in terms of a learning curve, and while it is largely intuitive, but people with certain intellectual disabilities or who have development issues, for them to train them, and how do we really make sure these machines understand their style of speaking is something that we need to kind of be a little more cognizant, and the potential areas for it to work on for these areas.
Right, and I just wanted to finally highlight one thing. Anand gave us a lot of potential for these devices. Now it's important to think also what Vidisha said about the potential gendered exclusions, because you can have the potential for this device to give you directions where to go and how to navigate your Aura app, and that's great. But if you same time have the fact that women may not feel safe in public space or be very aware of public space, then that potential may be lost, because then you have that intersection. So let's say you're a visually impaired female user who want to use it at a bus stop to identify their direction where they're going. That intersections is also very important to be cognizant of. That you have this intersecting potential, you can say intersecting exclusions in some senses, or intersecting challenges that needs to be dealt with. But that can be taken care of. That can be taken care of, but you need to pay attention to it. To the fact that there are these intersecting things. So if you think that a voice interface is magically going to solve issues for visually impaired users, but you don't take the question of gender into account, then you're probably not going to create a solution that works for that intersection. Or if you take intersection needs of learning various sort of learning environments or difficulties, then combining that with other things, again, the technology may not serve as in its purpose. All right, I'm going to give it up to you. Yeah, one
small.
Yeah.
When most of us type, right? If we have been typing for long enough, we don't look at the keyboard, right?
Yeah.
So we could actually have a keyboard that will tell you which letter you press. Okay, after you press a letter, and you can have visually impaired person put on earphones, so they know what they're typing if they've been practicing that for long enough. So they don't have to tell it out loud, and at the same time, they exactly know what they're asking for from the app. It can be Ola, Uber, Paytm.
Could I just ask you one question? how much do you know about how visually impaired users use smartphones right now? How much do you know about how users with various visual impairments use the smartphone right now?
I don't know much, but I just thought this could help out. I'm not saying.
I'm not picking on you, but I'm just going to give an example because this is a very typical sentiment. We have a technology, we have a modality, and we say this could help in this way. Okay, but we start. I think already what you'll find anywhere you go. So I've not worked in this field. I've worked with rural small-scale farmers, right? So then many people go there and say we can create this technology for their need. Okay, but what you'll find, if you actually go and spend time and actually listen and look at what happens, is that there's already appropriation of technology. There are already features, maybe not even designed for accessibility, or maybe not even designed for the idea of rural farmers, that gets appropriated already. So when you think about this, oh, this can help, you have to say, stop myself a little bit. And I say, okay, let me first look at how people are already making use of this. Because probably they've already found features that work for that. Or they have other ways of doing it. Or maybe that's not needed at all. In the lunch break, we had an example of somebody who had developed a keyboard with visual impairment in mind. And I'm going to paraphrase this example, but the idea being that people who are blind who have visual impairments can't use touchscreens. And that assumption in itself is absolutely wrong. And so you start from a flawed assumption, and if you start from insufficient knowledge of how people are already appropriating technology and making it work for themselves, the risk is that you, at best, waste your time. Okay? At best, you waste your time and you waste resources that could have been put to so much better use. So I'm just going to say that instinct that we often, and I'd say as an engineer, for me that's an engineering instinct. That instinct that we have this technology, we can make it work for them. You have to stop, at design approach is to stop, go back and think, okay, first let me figure out how people have already appropriated this technology. Then I can think about how we modify it and so on. Okay, short comment, but I want you to get to working on these cases that I've given you. Many of you have already identified certain things, certain barriers. You've thought about who this was designed for and who this was designed in mind for. You may have thought about certain social norms that have been embedded in these applications. I mean, and it's a silly example, about how social norms may be embedded in these things. We have these big pens for her on Amazon that are pink big pens, because obviously women need big pens. I mean, this is a very silly example, but social norms get embedded in various ways in these applications. So I wanted to complete that work. I'll give you 20 minutes in your groups. You have resources here. Ankit has been very graciously spending his time, so he's a great resource for you guys to think about how these technologies operate and where they may lack in accessibility, where they may not. You have me, you have Vidisha who's also worked on some of these things, so you can use us as resources, but also work in your teams to identify these 4 areas which I said, and then, if you feel that we have an idea, this is the barriers, then try and think about, okay, what might be some changes that we could try? What could be something we could prototype here to think about what we might tweak or change? What could be potential modifications? Now remember, the trick is to stop yourself a little bit and say, here are some potential things we could look into. Okay? Not knowing we should redesign it in this way, because you probably don't know. Right? But think about what could be some of the modifications we could do. So I'll give you 20 minutes to do that. I think we still have 20 minutes. So you can get into your groups, and you'll have 20 minutes to finish off the work you did and think about what could be some directions we can go.